Welcome to 1+1. I am Courtney Act. Mark Trevorrow has had a career spanning 4 decades. He first found fame in the 80s as a part of the cabaret troupe The Globos, but it was the creation of his character, Bob Downe, that really made him a household name. Mark and I are friends, but his influence on me started long before we met.
He has dined with Panthers. He is a love commando. He is Bob Downe.
Good morning, Moolaba. 3 points.
Mark Trevorrow, welcome to 1+1.
Oh, hello, darling. Here we are.
Here we are.
Second series.
Second series, and what a delight to be here with you. We've known each other for so many years.
Haven't we? I've known you man and boy.
You have.
You were just a little wee thing, but we all knew you were going places.
Oh, well, when I was a little wee thing, I do remember watching you on Good Morning Australia with Bert Newton. And
Working with Bert Newton was a dream come true, and he presided over the last of the old school variety. Even though it was a morning show, he made it like the last of the old school variety TV shows. It was a perfect frame for the character of Bob. He totally got what I was doing.
All the leaves are brown, the leaves are brown, and the sky is grey, and the sky is grey. I went for a walk, I've been for a walk on a winter's day.
I remember I was downstairs. I used to perform with Veronica's as a kid. We were in a little group together called the Yabba Dabba Doo Young Entertainers. And,
As you do.
As you do. I was downstairs rehearsing, and Colleen, their mum, called me up, was like, "Shaney, come upstairs. There's somebody on the telly I want you to see." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Toddled upstairs, and there was Bob Downe in all of his polyester glory. You know what was so fascinating is I remember seeing Bob and just being in awe, not knowing that it was allowed, not knowing that it was possible for a man to act in this way, but then extremely quickly retreating into shame and realising that, why was I the one
That was your reaction?
who was singled out? Yeah, I was like,
why was I told to watch this?
why was I told to come here? What are you trying to say?
wow.
Oh, why do you think I'd like him? And I remember feeling that shame. And the shame already at age 16 was already unspoken, but felt in a way that I just quickly retreated. And I remember for many years.
That has really triggered a memory for me. I can remember as a kid, like from about the age of 12 or 13 onwards, you know, where you really do know that you're same-sex attracted. And it's the most terrible, terrible secret, even though, funnily enough, everybody knew I was gay before I did.
Yeah.
I think that might have been a little bit similar at your place.
Yeah, totally.
And I can remember sitting in front of the TV when Monday Conference, which was the Q&A of its time, Monday Conference would be all about homosexuality. And there'd be a terrible discussion where early gay activists would be having stuff thrown at them, you know, by the studio
talking
audience.
60s, 70s?
Late early 70s.
Right.
People now don't understand the fear and the silence around it.
It's the silence, isn't it, that causes
It's
the shame?
horrible.
Because you're not able to talk about it, you're not able to communicate. You don't see any examples except this one, and everybody looks, and you're like,
I'm so sorry that was that was your experience, but I understand it completely. See, I was the only gay in the village.
You were.
As Bob.
You were the original only gay in the
It
village.
was kind of weird.
And interestingly, right, Bob is almost this personification of everything you think a gay man is meant to be. And I wonder, because I've realised that as I've grown up, I'm all of the things that I was afraid of in my youth. Like I'm a queer, feminine man who wears women's clothes, who's sex positive, who talks about all these things. I'm like, oh, I'm the one that they warned us about. And in an interesting way, I think I wasn't able to express my femininity as a boy, and I found Courtney as this socially acceptable way to do that. And I'm wondering how much of Mark is in Bob, and was Bob a place where you're allowed to just express yourself freely?
Bob is me as a very annoying, show-off 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Bob is basically me as a kid.
Yeah.
And that's why he's so childish and naughty and silly and all the hands on and shut up and all that sort of stuff.
What was it like going from suburban Melbourne to, you know, big city Melbourne, sitting there in those clubs after all of that isolation and sort of silence around identity, to then be in a place where you could be celebrated and accepted?
Well, I was really lucky too. What happened was too that I was obsessed, as a kid, I was obsessed with all forms of media. And so I started at 17, became a copy boy at the old Melbourne Sun News Pictorial, which is now the Herald Sun. So all of a sudden, I was in that media environment where there were a lot of sort of, not a lot, but there were enough gay people around me. And then as soon as I started being a reporter, I was working on the women's pages, and but they had a very progressive women's editor called Caroline Ross, a legendary Melbourne journalist. She was always trying to extend the boundaries of what the women's pages would be. So I was out doing features at the age of 18 and 19 and going to these going to theatres where I would interview people for promoting their shows. So all of a sudden, the theatre world was presented to me, you know, behind the scenes at a very young age. And then on top of that, I was a groupie, a regular groupie at the Rocky Horror Show. In Melbourne, we saw this wonderful sort of very positive image of theatrical gay life. And you see, when we started the Globos, when I started the cabaret group that I had with Wendy DeWaal, we lip-synced old records and old TV, because that was the cabaret that I saw.
And there'll be no one else alive in all the world except you and me. Yeah, 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 yeah. Pretty baby, I never knew
You were a group, a performance troupe, who lip-sank songs, but then you also recorded your own versions of songs like Tinderella de Luna.
And The Beat Goes On.
And The Beat Goes On, which were top 20 hits in Australia.
And they were, and we'd lip-sync those.
They're back in business at Kinsella's now. How long does the season run?
We've got another couple of weekends to go, and then hopefully we'll move into sort of a Wednesday, Thursday thing up until Christmas.
Then once we started lip-syncing our own songs, I thought, well, let's write our own parody commercials and lip-sync those. So we'd be lip-syncing our own voices, and that was the show that Tim Conograve, who wrote Holding the Man, he was in that show where we really refined that whole thing, because Tim had a beautiful voice. Nell Schofield was in that show.
Wow.
She's got a gorgeous voice. So we used to just lip-sync our own voices.
She lost her top at crowded Bondi, and we were there to catch it.
Ben Crop exclusive. Can fish fall in love?
Skippy, our new star. Meet the man who operates her paws.
And where would you be performing these shows?
At Kinsella's Cabaret, which was the old funeral parlour in Sydney that became this unbelievable hotspot cabaret from 1982 onwards. This is in the days when Sydney was the centre of the known universe.
Yeah.
Elton lived in Sydney, David Bowie lived in... Everybody came to Sydney, stayed in Sydney, lived in Sydney.
Give me some name drops.
My favourite story of doing the Globos at Kinsella's... And by the way, we used to go on at 2:30 in the morning.
Wow.
All the chorus kids used to come to see us because they'd finish up at the Madge or the Royal, and they'd come down, but they'd always get in late and get a crap seat. And this young friend of mine was up the back, and he told me later, he was up the back, and there was this glamorous couple that were, we thought of as being old. They might have been in their late 30s, early 40s, old couple. And they were canoodling, and he was very elegant, and she was kind of like a bit of a hippie lady, and they were canoodling and ignoring the show. And he leant forward and he went, "Excuse me," like that, and they turned around. It was Joni Mitchell and Jeremy Irons.
Ah, well, you've seen life from both sides now, haven't you?
We had this sort of magic carpet ride into the business as the Globos. And of course you think, oh, this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
Ben Gannon was going to make a movie. George Harrison took us to dinner.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And then of course it all falls apart, and then you're in a heap in your mid-20s, and then you find out how hard the biz really is, which was a great thing to happen while I was still young enough to get over it.
Tinderella di Luna, Tinderella come latte, tutte notte sei sul tetto, sopra il tetto come i gatti, ma se c'è la luna piena tu diventi candida, ma se c'è la luna piena tu diventi candida.
So where did Bob Downe actually come about?
Bob is something I've done since I was a kid. When the Globos had broken up and I was working as a waitress in a cocktail bar, no, I was working as a barista at a Cafe Anglebe. There was a food fair where everybody put sketches on out front of their business in Glebe Point Road.
Yeah.
There was this wonderful girl that I was working with, and we'd already riffing and laughing and fooling around. We became a comedy double, and we put a little sketch outside where we did a fake Entertainment This Week interview, and I was the shop dummy interviewer, and I needed a name because I could do the sign off, and it was Bob Downe, Entertainment Tonight, and that's where the character was born in September 1984.
Wow. Bob Downe came out around the time of the AIDS pandemic as well. Mm-hmm. What was Sydney like during that era?
Well, it went from magic time to horror time pretty quickly. I lost dozens of friends, including Tim Congreve. But it never got to what it got to in the horror show that happened in the States. But of course, we knew that was going on. So it was a sort of a rumbling underground horror story on which we just all kept partying, kept performing, kept pushing ahead.
But still devastating, right, in the local community.
And of course, I was one of those pussy, pathetic people that was too scared to get tested.
Right.
I was absolutely too terrified to get tested because I was so sure that I'd be positive.
So just living with the fear?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was this constant undercurrent, this constant undercurrent. I'm so ashamed of that it took me so long to build up the guts to get tested.
But why would you have the guts to get tested when you think about all of the messaging, all of the fear?
Well, until the combination therapies, it was a death sentence.
Yeah. And the Grim Reaper ads, whilst doing their job, for those who aren't familiar, I remember, the Grim Reaper ads were these horrible, scary ads that ran on commercial television. The Grim Reaper, the spectre of death with a bowling ball, knocking over families and people, and just this idea of the killer that is HIV and AIDS.
At first, only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it. The fact is, over 50,000...
I was very skinny. I was always a super tall, skinny as a rake. That was my build. And so looking back and looking at photographs and video of me in my early Bob Downe persona, I think everybody just used to look at me and think, oh, he's got it. And I think there was a real, whenever I did gigs, whenever I did television, whenever I was mixing with straight showbiz in the straight showbiz world, there was this kind of weird thing that I couldn't never work out what was quite going on. But now I look at the pictures, I think, they all think I've got the act, as Cindy Pastel calls it. The Queen's all called it the act. And isn't that hilarious?
The stigma.
She's got the act.
The stigma back then about it, what was it like?
Well, I'll tell you a story. I was doing Hey Hey It's Saturday, and I was in the corridor with Daryl chatting, and the guest star that day was Donny Osmond. Daryl went, oh, Donny, this is one of our comedians, one of our local comedians who's on the show. This is Bob Downe, this is Donny Osmond. And Donny Osmond finally focused on me, and I put my hand out he put his hand out to shake me, and he looked at me and he went like that. He refused to touch me.
No Princess Diana moment from Donny Osmond.
No. And of course, what was so indicative of the time, this is like late 80s, 87 maybe, I was in trouble. I was the one that had embarrassed Daryl. That was the vibe.
Right.
Daryl wasn't angry at Donny Osmond for not shaking my hand. I had embarrassed Daryl. Isn't that incredible? Doesn't that just sum up the time?
Yeah. How do you feel about that stigma? Are you angry? Do you blame? Do you understand?
Yeah, I guess I still am angry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also because I'm 63 and I came through all of that being as we said, being the only gay in the village, in terms of comedy.
And what was it like when the tide started to turn, when the combination drug therapies came about?
Well, it was magic.
HIV was no longer the death sentence.
And also HIV produced ACT UP and the serious pushback from the international gay and lesbian community against the oppression of it all, and it had a sort of a very paradoxical effect of pushing the whole issue of being gay into the international spotlight in a way that might not have happened if HIV hadn't come along. So we turned it into a triumph, particularly, as you say, when the combination therapies arrived in 94, 93, 94, 95, and people just weren't dying anymore. Although the worst time was losing Tim and a whole bunch of friends in the early 90s. They just couldn't hang on. That was the most heartbreaking time, actually.
How does it feel for you being of a generation where you're actually one of few gay men of your age relative to what there could have been if the HIV pandemic hadn't happened?
You do have survivor guilt.
Yeah.
You definitely have survivor guilt, no question.
Yeah.
No question. And also, but I feel so lucky being 63. You see, I think if you're a little kid and then growing up through the AIDS thing, I think you probably absorbed a lot more of the horror and the shame element of it, whereas being 63, I hit the gay scene when I was 17, 18 in 1977 and 78 when the gay land was exploding. So I got that precious 5 years of gay life. You know, it was hip.
Yeah.
It was trendy to be gay.
Wow.
It was trendy and hip to go to gay clubs.
Yeah.
And gay plays, you know, gay musicals. So being gay was actually like a plus. And then your sensibility is formed in that atmosphere of acceptance. And of course, coming out to the family, everything's fine. You know what I mean? It was all just dandy. Yeah. So I must have carried the strength of that into the HIV era in a way that if you're younger, you absorbed a lot more of the horror and the fear of it.
Yeah. So emerging into the 90s, Bob started to have some huge success on an international level.
Well, because Mum and Dad gave me the airfare,
right.
I blitzed it at my first Edinburgh Festival and started going regularly.
Then you have this huge success, and then it splinters off into television, variety TV. I've seen all the videos online of you and Lily Savage.
I did more television in the UK in that 10-year period that I was based in London than I've ever done here. I remember, and it was absolutely incredible. I can remember walking down with my best friend Dean, came and spent a summer with me. I think it was 94, 95. I was walking down Oxford Street with him in London, and it must have been like a Saturday afternoon. I mean, in summer, absolutely teeming with people. And Dean went a little bit sort of quiet, and I said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And he said, "Mark," he said, "every single person has recognised you as we're walking down the street." He said, including people upstairs on buses. And I had just stopped even noticing it.
Yeah.
I'd stopped noticing it. And it was such a moment, an incredible moment.
What did that feel like for you to feel that
was
validation?
That was a thrilling moment.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't really thought it. Because you know these things, and you know this from yourself, these things happen. I remember somebody asking John Lennon, what's it like being a Beatle? He said, well, we were the most popular band in Liverpool, then we were the most popular band in the Northwest, then we were the most popular band in England. And he said it happens so, it's like the boiling frog thing.
Yeah.
You don't really notice it because it happens over such a long period of time. That 10 years in London was just, I came home really because, I always say that I came home because I wanted to come home, and I did. I did want to come home. But the reason why I wasn't able to stay was I could not get, because I'm 5th, 6th generation Australian, I could never get residency.
So you had to come back to Australia?
I had to come home.
And did you feel like, did you feel defeated that
No, I didn't.
Glory had been cut short?
Because we were still in that, and the reason why I did it was because we were still in that fabulous cargo cult period before the internet and everything, where if you had been a success somewhere else, everybody thought you were it in a bit.
Yeah.
So I came home like, oh, gee, you did really well in London. And then I started doing all the Mardi Gras broadcasts.
Right.
And so
I remember watching that on the ABC back in 1996,
Yeah.
I think was the first one.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 2007 Mardi Gras launch!
It turned out to be a great time to come home.
And did you get to come back as our Bob?
Yes, it was all like that.
Yeah.
It was all like that. Because all those TV presenters, Kerry Ann and everybody, they were like, you know, they really, you know, I'd done what they all wanted to do.
Yeah.
Work in the UK.
Yeah.
You know, present television in the UK.
Yeah.
So it was perfect.
Yeah.
It worked out magnificently well.
And so what sort of things awaited you when you got back?
Well, touring and playing in big venues, you know what I mean? Making good money, finally playing kind of like, you know, bigger rooms. And then you see at the same time, Ted Robinson had started Good News Week on the ABC and asked me to do it as one of the panellists. And I said, I'd love to, but he didn't want me to do it as Bob. And I did not want to work as myself because there was a sort of a lingering self-homophobia.
Yeah.
Like, who wants to see a poof on TV? And I was scared to be myself.
Yeah.
And Ted said to me, Ted Robson, bless him to this day, said, no. We have character people do like Flacco and Sandman and everything. That's all the sketches. We need people to be themselves on the panel. So against my better judgment and really reluctantly, I appeared as myself. And on the first show of Good News Week, so that's about 98 when it was on the ABC, the first show, Mikey Robbins is blathering on as he always does. And at one point he said, do you know Paul? He said, dugongs, apart from human beings, dugongs are the only creature on the planet that make love face to face. And I went, there was this shocked silence because it was like, what was anybody going to say? And I went, speak for yourself, Mikey. And it was my coming out moment on television.
Oh, wow.
And it exploded, the reaction was explosive.
What was it like taking off that mask or that shield of
I
Bob?
remember that. I remember the laugh that it got. And I was so proud of myself for being so fast and jumping in, because that's the thing about doing panel shows.
Yeah.
Jump in the holes.
Yeah.
You've got to jump into the silence. And Ted just hugged me and hugged me and hugged me. And then, of course, started singing regularly with Paul McDermott.
We'll play a melody and turn the lights down low so that I can see. We gotta do that, we gotta do that.
It sort of led to a whole second string to my, to my performing bow, you know what I mean? Like, started...
So Mark got to flourish.
Yeah, started doing radio, started doing The Way We Were on the ABC. And then I thought I was going to give up Bob and started singing as myself.
I remember when you released an album as Mark in the early 2000s. And I remember that as being quite a moment of celebration of Mark.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Because I discovered that singing as myself, I could croon. I taught myself to sing being Bob. And so I was ready to sing straight. My show at the moment where I sing as myself is called Singing Straight. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't have been able to do it years before. But again, thanks to Ted Robinson and Good News Week and Paul McDermott, that was when I did start singing as myself. And then that led to really singing straight, in the sense of singing ballads, going to emotional places that you would never go to singing as Bob, because Bob's always about getting the laughs.
So we've been told, and some choose to believe it. I know they're wrong, wait and see. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers.
Was there a fear of letting go of Bob and...
No, I was really keen to let go of Bob.
Wow, okay.
Well, because when you think about it, when I came home from London, I was 40. I'd turned 40. And so I was kind of really ready to explore other things, and which was a wonderful thing to do, including doing ABC radio.
Back to the journalist roots.
Exactly. But then I missed it. I actually missed it, to the point that once I started doing Bob again, I really enjoy the frocking up. I actually really enjoy finding fantastically fabulous and funny costumes. Bob's basically me with a wig on. Bob's just out.
Well, it's interesting because I think when I started my drag career, I performed as Courtney, and it was this compartmentalised thing, and it was always like Courtney and Shane, and never the twain shall meet.
I was like that about Bob.
And then as you go up, as the world comes to evolve, as you come to accept yourself, now, for me, it's sort of Shane and Courtney are two ends of the same stick.
Hello.
And I just feel like it's weird, and you've got two names as well. Sometimes I wish that I didn't have two names.
Yeah.
Because people think that I'm two different people, or they have to refer to Shane in the third person or Courtney in the fourth person.
And they always want to know, how do you want to be...
Yeah.
How do you want to be...
Just me.
Yeah. How do you want to be spoken to? Do you want us? Are you going to be Bob? Are you going to be Mark? And I say, I always let them choose. And people often call you the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And they always get really embarrassed and apologise. And I always say, it's okay, I answer to both.
Yeah.
What I realised when I started working as myself, that was not something I should throw away lightly. It's a huge achievement to create a character like what Paul O'Grady did with Lily Savage.
Yeah. I often think that dating a magician, dating a drag queen, dating a puppeteer, and possibly dating Bob Downe, there's sort of perhaps a similar stigma that surrounds those occupations.
You mean we can't get laid?
It must have been the Mardi Gras opening ceremony. We were in Hyde Park. There was you, me, and Candy Stratton sitting at the side of the stage.
Yeah.
We were having a conversation about love and romance, and I was conveying the woes of my love life at the time. I was probably 23, maybe. And the announcer was calling my name out to go on stage. I was in drag as Courtney. And you turned to me and you said, darling, people like us aren't loved by the individuals. We're loved by the hundreds of thousands. And it was like, welcome to the stage, Courtney Act. And I was like, I won't be needing this. And I went on stage and did this number. And I remember it being such it's actually such a brilliant memory in my mind because it's so theatrical and so like, that it'll be in the movie if there's...
This is why I'm so lucky that I didn't get married until I was 57 or 58 years old, and I finally found someone who had a bit of a show-busy background. He had, my hub, Steph, had actually had a kids' theatre company with his girlfriend at the time. Oh, go crazy. And so he already understood the biz.
Yeah.
And he's a creative himself.
Yeah.
And so they're all the wrong one till the right one comes along, and maybe the right one came along for me because I stopped worrying about that. You know, like looking for love in all the wrong places, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Do you think there's an element of your self-acceptance and Bob and Mark and the breaking down of those two constructed identities that then allowed someone else to love you because you now loved yourself?
That's right. I think that's absolutely true. And it comes with age and maturity.
Did you have shame about feeling desired as Mark being Bob Downe? Did you feel any shame about the way gay men viewed you?
No, I was desperate to be like... desperate for someone to find, you know, to find me attractive.
Yeah. But do you think that Bob detracted from that?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I was just like being a drag queen.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like being a drag queen.
And what do you think it was about Steph and about you that the time and the place and the circumstances?
I think because he was hip enough, he'd had enough show business in his background.
Bob's not just the biz, though. There's a whole other layer to this character performance.
Yeah, I know, but he knew about character performance, having dabbled a little bit of that. So how lucky am I?
It's been an absolute treat and a pleasure getting to have... This is the longest conversation we've had. We probably had them at Mardi Gras, but we just
Well, I was going to say, what we need... This is the first time we've had a conversation where there isn't pumping disco music and we're shouting and not hearing each other.
And losing our voices.
Hello. For
the gift.
When we've got a gig the next day.
This is what the world needs. The world needs more sit-down, long-form conversations.
Especially at beautiful places like Dulcie's.
Mark Trevorrow, thank you so much for joining me on
Thank you,
1+1.
sweetie. It's been lovely.